Let's blast into it. Let's blast into it. Let's blast off. Let's blast out of this season, maybe out of an era. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. I'm Kevin McCaffrey, still doing a Cubs podcast for now. And here's the other guy who's here and who's been doing it for years, Adam Mamawala. What's up, Adam?
How's it going? I believe, I have no way to prove this, but we are on episode what? It's like 180,
78
something like that.
or something?
It's a
Yeah.
lot. I believe this may be the first time that we have ever recorded another podcast without there having been a win in between. There have been some negative stretch at some point where they lost like 6 in a row, but I don't have a memory of it if it has happened.
No, and you're better at keeping track of and catching those kind of weird streaks than I am. You were blasting out on the @Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram @Away Games Pod. The streak
Some
of
attempted optimism. It felt
yeah,
flat.
right. Well, the only game, the only more than 4-run game in whatever the last 20, however, was when we scored 7 in the first and then lost. Right.
Yeah, it was that one. There was a 7-1 victory over the Indians and a 7-run first inning that ended in complete disaster. And again, I'm not the Elias Sports Bureau. I don't know Elias personally. We're not on a first name basis. But if I did, I would bet that in our lifetimes, the Cubs have not had a game where a team scored 15 unanswered runs.
I mean, that sounds, I mean, it's a silly way to put it. But yeah, we've gone in between, as you say. This might be the first time in all that many episodes that we haven't had a win in the midst of that. And included in there was, as you put it, I mean, there's so many ways to put that one game, which I think is, as we look at it right now, you'd have to say kind of the turning point of the season, where they couldn't salvage one of the games in Milwaukee after staking Jake Arrieta to a 7-run lead. But like blowing a 7-run lead, that's one way to put it. And that happened. Allowing 15 unanswered runs, I know that happened, but I didn't even think of it that way. That's, I mean, the odds, astronomical.
Right, and I mean, it's not unheard of for a team to blow a 7-run lead if they have it early in the game because a team chips away by the. But I mean, that game was blown in the middle innings. And
that was done.
I'm not a professional baseball person. We've never made money from this podcast, FYI. But
we have technically gotten a few dollars, but we are for sure in the red.
Yeah, we have. But if I were, I would say that walking in a run when your team is up 7-0 in the first inning is not good.
If that's not a fireable offense, it's incompetent baseball. And obviously we know that Jake Arrieta is not trying to do that, but it doesn't matter. Like if you're walking in a run up 7-0 early, you're not ready to be a professional, or you are no longer ready to be a professional. Right. You know, I mean, it was incredible. That was like one of my busiest days of the year, just life-wise and the rest of my jobs-wise. So that was a game I wasn't watching, but I was checking in throughout the day. And just like, I was glad I was as busy as I was. I couldn't believe it. And yet it was a real throwback to when we could believe the worst at every turn as Cubs fans, you know?
Right. And I mean, that was a series for me where for the first time in as long as I can remember, there were 2 games in one series that I just turned off the game. Yeah. Because that first game that Patrick Wisdom hits that bomb to tie it, and then they completely unravel, and I think it was the 7th or 8th. I just, by the time there was a home run and it was like 10-4, I was like, nope, I can't. I'm actively getting upset. Yeah. And I don't want to do this. And then in that game, fortunately, I don't know where I was going. I was actually, I'll tell you where I was going. I was going to see Shohei Ohtani somehow do worse than Jake Arrieta. That's where I was going.
That's true. Yeah, you saw the Ohtani game, and he gave up 7 in the first, and his team won.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the case?
That was actually great, yes. Yeah. Chapman, a game started by a domestic abuser was also blown by a domestic abuser. So good job, Yankees. You're really doing a wonderful
Domingo
wonderful
Germán
job.
Started that game?
Yeah, Germán started the Yankees. Wow. And I would have been one of these suckers, too, if it were a Cubs game. These poor fans, and I'll never say that about Yankees fans again, but these poor fans waited over 2 hours of rain delays only to see Chapman walk the bases loaded up 4 and give up a grand slam to tie the game. But in any case, I'm getting way off track here. But the point being that I was spared by going to a Yankees game to not have to watch the end of that debacle. And I mean, we're recording this a little bit before the Tuesday night game where Jake Arrieta is again starting, and
Mm-hmm.
of course they'll probably win because nothing in baseball makes sense. But like, there is no part of me that has any confidence that the Cubs will win this game.
No, I would. This would be if I was betting in Vegas. I would absolutely, I would put the money down, root for the Cubs, and then
Mm-hmm.
collect my money if my rooting interest doesn't work. Like playing both sides of it. Make me happy in some way. Let me profit from my own misery. If I'm, or I'll be happy that they win. It does feel like, you know, even the biggest mismatches in baseball, it's pretty close to a coin toss in terms of the probability that either team wins. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. I think it's a thing Mike Quaddy said, or either Quaddy or Dale Swaim, one of the managers we don't ever want to see again here in Chicago. I think Quaddy seemed like a nice guy for what it's worth, but one of them said, and I'm sure this is a thing been said through baseball throughout time, every team wins 60 and loses 60. It's about the 42 in between there. So games are pretty even. I do not expect the Cubs to win tonight. I would be shocked if they did, but statistically, losing 11 in a row is really hard. So it's like, I don't know. But this is, I mean, so much has happened in this week of nothing but losses,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, just in terms of the direction of where this season is going. And I guess we can talk about that, right? I mean, we can also talk about, well, I guess whatever over the past week, game for game. Is there anything specifically to address, you think?
Well, I mean, I think you summed it up nicely on Twitter at Away Games Pod, of course. That it's not that surprising that this team is basically 500. It's just a little alarming the way in which they've landed at this point,
Sure.
because they were probably overachieving given the fact that they don't have starting pitching. They have Kyle Hendricks, who struggled a bit early, or really has struggled against the Braves twice, and otherwise has
Right.
been very good. And Alzolay, who has been a good, like, I'd say like a 3 in your rotation.
Yeah,
And
three or
then,
four, four on a good
yeah,
team, probably.
right.
Yeah.
And then after that, what do you really have with any consistency? Zach Davies is not consistent. Trevor Williams was not consistent and then has missed a large stretch of the season. And Arrieta started out pretty good and then has just been like almost unpitchable um, for the last couple months. So
Yeah.
I guess what I look at the most in the past week is the bullpen being fallible, which is how bullpens tend to be.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize that the only reason that the Cubs were winning the games that they were winning is because the bullpen was as dominant as they were. The other takeaway that I have is that the Cubs perhaps are one of the teams who has been affected by this crackdown on sticky stuff because people like Tommy Nance, who were had a lot of success coming up and an extremely high spin rate, are seemingly not doing so well anymore. So I'm a little curious about that.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and we're not saying like, oh, Tommy Nance cheats or anything like that. Obviously, this is a
He
thing.
cheats the way everyone else cheats if he does cheat.
Right. Offense is up across the league, but it's not unfair to see one of the things that was so eye-popping about Tommy Nance was the insane spin rate. And Tommy Nance has not been good since the crackdown happened. So that's not taking wild guesses about things. This is just a most likely cause and effect. And Nance is far from alone in that. But yeah, that is a guy who it has taken a dive at this exact time, right? And like the bullpen is still, it's not like the bullpen has been insanely bad either over the
Right.
last week or two. There's been a couple of bad games. I mean, Trevor McGill had the worst game of his life, obviously, in that
Yeah.
in that Milwaukee game.
I mean,
So,
Craig Kimbrell hasn't given up a run.
no, Greg Kimbrell's still elite. Yeah, he's doing great, and Chafin's still doing great. I mean,
That's mainly because he hasn't pitched, I don't think.
oh, Chafin.
No,
Yeah.
Kimbrell. I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
Kimbrell.
he's
Yeah.
not been in
No,
a game.
Kimbrell's pitched once in the same span that I think Eric Sogard has pitched 4 times. I want to say 4 or maybe 5. But congratulations to Eric Sogard, who's now has more pitching appearances than any Cubs position player in history. So that is crazy. And the Cubs should be embarrassed that they've asked this guy to go out and pitch this many times. They should also be embarrassed that their management has played Eric Sogard, who has been unplayable. this whole time. D. Strange Gordon, who gives you the only skill that Sogard has, which is making bad contact, but making contact. But Strange Gordon also has speed and elite defense. He just activated his out clause, so he's gone. Gordon is out. I mean, like, there's just so many embarrassing things from that choices from management that I feel like has sort of come to fruition this over the past couple of weeks. And as you were saying about how this Cubs team is probably their real skill level is about what their record is. They've just gotten to it via extremes. I mean, yeah, you talk about the starting pitching and how it's not there. I mean, we said that in the season preview. There's a 1 on the staff and then a sea of 4s and 5s. And that's what's happened. I mean, I saw something, our friend Ken Schultz, one of the best baseball follows and best Cubs Twitter follows for sure, was saying, he was kind of criticizing the athletic writers. A couple of Cubs athletic writers were referring to this as like the most disappointing Cubs team in recent memory. And it's like, I don't know, man. The past 2 weeks have been insanely disappointing, but I don't think it's disappointing when the roster plays like what it is, you know?
Yeah. 2019 is more disappointing than this team.
Way more disappointing. That team had the players all underperformed down the stretch. I mean, if we could have cut and pasted this Craig Kimbrell to then, who knows what happens? The Cubs would have been, in the playoffs. And this team put together a huge streak of losses at the very end of the season when they needed it most. At least this team has the decency to lose when they could still make a decision to sell.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think this is the most disappointing team. And I'm not even like mad at the majority of the players here. The players want to do well. This is the players you have. I don't know what else to say,
So who is this on? The Ricketts or is it Hoyer?
I think it's on the Ricketts and Hoyer, and it's impossible to say who it's on more, although I would certainly lean Ricketts. I mean, I don't think Jed Hoyer had fun trading you, Darvish, I think I think you have to say I have to assume that Hoyer has mandates that obviously are not public. He has the parameters he has to work within over however long a stretch he's been told he has. And I'm not saying just when he's under contract. I'm saying, I don't know what their budget forecast is. But it's on them. I mean, and then the players have to play, sure. But like also Jed Hoyer hasn't given me, I don't know what he's working with, but he hasn't given me any reason to believe in him since he's been team president, That's not to erase the body of what he was the Cubs GM during the best time in the franchise history. So that's not nothing. But since he's been the guy in baseball operations, what are we happy about exactly that he did? I mean,
I got nothing.
Yeah, it's hard. You traded Darvish and Caratini for a bunch of teenagers who maybe will be good someday, but you had Darvish for 3 more years under reasonable, under a reasonable contract. You cut Kyle Schwarber to get a comparable player to save a couple $1 million. Schwarber and Darvish were just both named All-Stars, by the way. I mean. Patrick Wisdom was a guy they picked up last year, has been fine on the margins. Jake Marisnick makes sense as a bench guy.
Lester hasn't been great, but he'd certainly be better than Arrieta.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are relatively comparable, but certainly not worse than Arrieta. I just don't know what baseball decision you look at that has been made that gives you confidence going forward. And I mean, over the next month, we're going to get to the trade deadline, and I guess we're going to, you're up, Jed. Let's see what you got,
So along those lines, I mean, do you think that calls are already being made as our friends at Bleacher Report
or Bleacher Nation,
suggested? Like, I would think probably, and I also tend to think that unless the Cubs go on a real nice winning streak, none of us as fans can really argue why they shouldn't sell.
No,
right?
I would agree with that. I do think I agree with what Jed Hoyer said too, which is that no matter what's happening, like in this moment, this moment is not the time to make the decision because they could win 10 in a row. I don't think they will, but you have the time, so you might as well give it a week, give it to the All-Star break, see where you're at. But for sure, I have to imagine ever since the Darvish trade, That's many months ago. They've had an idea what they wanted, what they thought was whether wanted or not was a likely scenario come All-Star break this year. And that was that it would be time to start flipping some guys. So he's had to make calls. They've had to have been doing their research on the whole time up to now, looking what do we do if we're selling. And yeah, I would be in favor. I mean, I can't argue with selling at all. The caveat being this team should be using money to buy going into next year. This team should be extending the bats that work already. It's been a failure not to do so already. It's been incompetent to not extend one of the 3 bats you have. But yeah,
but here's the thing. I think if you trade Kimbrel, but especially if you trade Kris Bryant, you're not going to pull off some Aroldis Chapman thing where you trade him for half a season to get a Gleyber Torres and then re-sign him. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unlikely. And it's going to be weird because something we assume or some things will happen by the All-Star break, but it'll be impossible for us to judge how good or bad that is. I wouldn't even say until all the prospects they get mature. I would say until next offseason is over, because I don't know what money they plan on spending. If they plan on, throwing money at real free agents, and I'm talking either Rizzo, Baez, Bryant, or your Trevor Stories, your Corey Seagers, the other guys who are out there, making real baseball moves with your money. If you're planning on doing that in the offseason, I kind of don't have a problem with you trading anybody,
Are you still in the extend Rizzo, Bryant, Baez camp?
I am, yeah. And I am, unless you want to extend, unless you want to sign one of the other big names that brings you the same level or more offense.
It seems like the narrative around Rizzo, even aside from him not being vaccinated, it's starting to feel like people are questioning whether or not it would be a good idea to extend him given some of the lack of power and injury stuff. Do you think that's overstated?
I think it's probably a little overstated, but I also don't think it's just people being haters, although there is certainly a good chunk of that out there too. I mean, I think his injury problems have always been overstated. Just all you need to do is go look up his stats on Baseball Reference or Fangraphs and see how many games he plays every year. He plays more than most people. So we can talk about him having a balky back, and I'm not saying he doesn't have back issues, but he's played through it and productively pretty much the whole time. He's a guy who he's still hitting the ball decently hard, but he's not hitting it over the fence as much lately. You'd feel a lot better if he got into one of those hot streaks where he hits 7 homers in a week and a half or something, just to see that it's still there. But I do think now, I think going into the season, we were both just offer him 5 years and $100 million. And at this point, I don't think he's going to get offered that after the year by the Cubs. And I don't know if by anybody. So, yeah.
Now, do you buy into this narrative that this is actually exactly what the Ricketts want? Like the Cubs losing is good for business and that they can actually sell and be justified in doing so?
I get that narrative, but that to me assumes the Ricketts care about how they're seen or about anything baseball related. I don't think they care about whether they can get away with selling or not, because they didn't get away with it with Darvish. That was an inexcusable deal. So trading Darvish with 3 years on his contract for what they did, coming off a division win, I don't think the Ricketts care what people think. So I think as far as this being just what they wanted, I don't think it matters what's going on, really. I don't think there was going to be a ton of money difference for them either way. Right. How do you feel about that?
Every time the Darvish trade comes up, I feel like Trump. I'm like, it's a terrible deal.
Yeah,
it's a terrible deal.
Yeah, and it's a little Trumpian in that it's like you find yourself harping on the same thing over and over, but it's hard not to,
A fan base has never been treated worse than the Cubs fan base.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the fan base has been treated pretty bad throughout the years in previous in previous iterations, but many of those times the fan base was treated bad when there was no talent here anyway, and there wasn't as much money here. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do think that for Hoyer and for the Ricketts, it's easier for them, whether or not they want it. It's easier for them if the Cubs suck because there's going to be less pushback. Like if the Cubs had, let's say, split the last 10 games and they were still 4 games out of first, it becomes more difficult to justify those decisions. And most fans, us included, would be like, what the hell are you doing selling when we have the resources to buy and then make up those 4 games and get back into first place in what is a winnable, and I still believe it to be a winnable division. We're
Oh
not,
yeah, it is.
this is not the NL West. You're not going to see 3 teams with 95 plus wins.
Right.
But yeah, my attempt for optimism yesterday on Twitter involved me naming some stats about the 2015, 16, and 17 Cubs. Most notably, probably, are the 2017 Cubs, who were under 500 at the All-Star break. And then, actually, I was at the game coming out of the break. It was the same series that Quintana started his first game and arguably made his best start as a Cub. But I was at that game in Baltimore where the Cubs blew an 8-0 lead, and it seemed like it was going to be one of those, like, oh my God, this is the moment where this team just never recovers. And then they ended up winning it. But the point being, that team was 43-45 at the break and still won 90 games in the division. And I still believe that 90 games could be enough to win this division. The question is, do the Cubs have a run in them like that 2017 club did? And I kind of don't think so. Like, I think they could play 500 ball or 550 ball the rest of the year, or get lucky and run into a hot streak and play a bit above that. But do I think they're going to play 750 ball? I really don't think so.
Well, here's what they have to do as we speak now before the Tuesday night game. The Cubs would have to be for the second half of the season, they would have to be 9 games better than the Brewers in a half of the season. They'd have to be 9 games better. And they'd have to be, and they'd have to be 3 games better than Cincinnati the whole way. And they'd have to beat the Cardinals the whole way. Can they do that? Yeah. But if you run the simulations through the computer, how many times do they do that? Right. Not many, especially when the Brewers are sitting there with 3 aces on the team, basically, or 2 aces and a guy who's pitched very well this year in Peralta. So, yeah, I think, who I think this streak makes it easiest for is I think it makes it easier for Jed. More so than the Ricketts. What I will say is I don't think the Ricketts would have sold from a first place position. I don't think the Ricketts would have mandated selling from a first place position. Maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think that would have happened. I do actually believe the reports we got from people that was I don't think they were going to add Max Scherzer, but I believe they would have tried to add a pitcher and stand pat otherwise. But you go 0-10 in a 10-game stretch, and I think you do a pretty good job telling management what to do,
Right. I'm looking at 538. The Cubs are listed as a 13% chance to make the playoffs, which seems about right.
It does seem about right, and that has to be a 13% chance to win the division too, because there's absolutely no way you're getting a wild card.
There is no wild card coming out of this division. Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like the NL East is basically the Mets and currently a bunch of middling garbage. And I say that as, that's a record that our team's familiar with right now. But the West has 3 teams that are playing 575 ball or better right now. So yeah, it's division or nothing. And it seems like it's most likely nothing. So, I mean, I guess is it interesting to see it makes the trade deadline interesting, I guess, because what else do we have? It's not what I wanted to be excited about anymore. And it is a failure of this organization that a team with this budget and with this talent over the last era, basically, is in this position. It's a failure. So that sucks. But as we come up to the trade deadline, I guess that'll be our playoffs, right? That's what we're interested to see if that happens. Yeah. And there were a lot of some reports, some national reporters were saying today that from what they're hearing, Craig Kimbrell is the #1 name on the trade market,
which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? Hearing that,
I feel better about the prospect of trading Kimbrell than I do KB for like fully emotional reasons. It makes a lot of sense. You are selling very high with Kimbrell, and I'm trying to think of like the contending teams who most need a closer. Who do you think would be the prime team to go after him?
The A's and the Astros, I saw both, saw an anonymous executive say that that's where he expected them to go. I think it might have also been someone who was actually in the Boston front office, because it was suggested to him that Boston could use Kimbrel.
I feel like Matt Barnes has been good though, right?
I think he's been decent. Yeah. And Kimbrel was in Boston before and things started to go. He had some very good times and then things started to go a little sideways for him there. So I would also feel like that's less likely. I mean, the Dodgers have proven that they just will spend the money they have. Must be nice. Yeah. So, I mean, they do that. And the Dodgers, I mean, they have the highest paid player in baseball on their roster who's currently on administrative leave because he's been accused pretty credibly of rape, so of sexual assault in Trevor Bauer. So if the Dodgers, I mean, if you're telling me the Dodgers can somehow, and I don't know the logistics of this, but get some of that 40 million this year off the books, could they? I mean, picking up Craig Kimbrel for 16, why wouldn't they if they want to win another championship? So I could see the Dodgers interested. I could see the San Francisco Giants interested. The Giants, I think, is an interesting fit for a couple of the guys that the Cubs have. If the Cubs do end up dealing, you could say Rizzo or Bryant. I mean,
somehow it's hard for me to picture them dealing Rizzo, but I guess it's as possible as anything else.
Yeah, and I think so too. I haven't seen the kind of year Brandon Belt's having, but I don't think he's. I mean, I know he's missed a lot of games. So in San Francisco, Lamont Wade Jr. I saw playing some first base. So, I think Oakland, Houston, San Francisco for a number of reasons. The Dodgers. These are all teams, and I mean, obviously, there's we were talking Kimbrel, but there's always the KB to the Mets rumors too. So.
I mean that sweep of the Cardinals, like the series where Rizzo had that incredible at bat and hits a home run, and they end up sweeping the Cardinals. It feels like 10 years ago.
It feels like a really long time. We tweeted this too from Attaway Games Pod, but Pedro Strop won a game for the Cubs this year. How long ago does that feel?
I have no memory of that.
Yeah, Pedro Strop got a win for the Chicago Cubs this season, so that's crazy. And
had to have been like April, right?
Yeah, it was early on. Yeah. It was early on. He didn't open the year with the Cubs, but he came up and yeah, that was nice. And I mean, there's no way if we're coming in, this is not a hater podcast, but this is also not a cheerleader podcast, a blind cheerleader podcast. Like, there's no way to come into this after losing every game since the combined no-hitter and be positive. But one thing I will say is, like, I don't really blame, I'm not mad at the players for this, you know? Like,
no, I mean, I can't, even the players that I don't like I don't like Sogard. I don't think he's trying to be bad.
No,
I don't think Hayward is trying to be bad. He's just bad.
Yeah. When players are consistently not good and keep playing, this is, I mean, responsibility for them getting better at their craft and whatever, who knows what goes on behind the scenes. They have responsibility, of course, but this is, to be the Dennis Green thing, they are who we thought they were. This is, I think most of the players, Chris Bryant made the All-Star team. Craig Kimbrel was named an All-Star. These are guys who they've put up great seasons. Javi has been even worse than usual in terms of on-base percentage, but he's given you everything else. He's made more errors than usual, but he's also played good defense around those errors, which sounds like a crazy thing to say, but it is true. And he's been stealing bases. He's been hitting homers. He's been scoring runs. He's been knocking in runs. So, I mean, those guys have done what you could hope for. And then you have guys like Patrick Wisdom, not a lot of guys like Wisdom, but Wisdom and Marisnick, who are guys who've contributed more than you could have hoped for. So yeah, it's just, I think it was a real up and down roller coaster, but I think we've landed where this team kind of belongs in this moment. And it's just,
yeah. And frankly, the kinds of things we were talking about last week kind of don't feel like they matter anymore. Like, it's nice to have Nico back. That certainly makes a difference if he's right. But like, David Bodie and Matt Duffy are not going to save this team.
God, yeah. Remember Matt Duffy too? That was like, there's so many narratives in the course of a long baseball season. But remembering when Matt Duffy was like, that's the piece that's really diversifying this lineup in the way that we need, and he was, but that does not a division win you.
The thing about it is that you look at that stretch from 2015 to 2018, right? So you've got 4 seasons where in 15 they overachieve and they get farther than anybody thought. 16 they make all of our dreams come true. They're the best team in baseball. 17 there's kind of a natural regression, probably just from being exhausted from being the Cubs having won the World Series, but they still win the division and frankly get about as far as that team could reasonably have gone.
Yeah.
18 very disappointing end, but they still won 95 games. It's hard to shit on that.
That was disappointing and unlucky. Yeah.
Right. And then, I mean, it took an almost impossibly good streak from the Brewers. It's not like the Cubs tanked. The Brewers just didn't lose in September.
A little deja vu, huh? Remember when the Brewers just won 10 in a row as the Cubs are losing 10 in a row?
God damn it. But all that to say that we are now in the middle of a season that feels an awful lot like 3 consecutive seasons of what should have been our window are basically 500 teams.
Mm-hmm.
They blow it down the stretch in 19. I think they finished 84 and 78.
Yeah.
Last year they won the division, but made no noise in the playoffs. And 34 and 26 is fine, but it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And as we record this, they're a game under 500, 2 games under 500, and it kind of feels like that's more or less where they'll be, if not worse. I would love to be wrong, but like your window should not include 3 years where you're a 500 team. That's not how competitive windows work. Especially not for teams that have the resources that the Cubs do.
Yeah. And I mean, that have the resources that the Cubs do. And it's a thing that's talked about a lot, but I don't think it's unfair to that. Theo famously talked about the offense broke. And that was 2.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what did
Can
they
we
change?
still blame Chili Davis for this?
I don't think so. And Anthony Iapoce, if you want opinions on current Cubs hitting coach Anthony Iapoce, who's from the neighborhood that Adam and I now live in, Astoria, ask Ken Schultz, Ken Schultz _ on Twitter. He'll tell you. I don't think. It was a failure of management because they didn't change enough then. And I mean, here's just a thing. Like, let's use Kyle Schwarber as a test case. They did everything wrong the whole way with Kyle Schwarber. They didn't deal him when there was interest and when there was crowding in it positionally and talking about, well, we can't keep the whole core. So they didn't deal him when there was interest, and we were fine with that because we believed in his ceiling. They then let him bottom out, cut him to save a few dollars, and now he's absolutely kicking the shit out of the ball. He's injured now, but he absolutely kicked the shit out of the ball in Washington. So I mean, like, that's how they handled Schwarber is kind of like a microcosm for, like, they just didn't take many distinct correct turns in the years since then. In the years since 2017, 2018. I mean, the best turn they took was signing Yu Darvish for 6 years. And what did they do with that? Right. Like, so that's very depressing because we had a front office that I believed was at the absolute top of baseball for a while. And God bless, they got us to that goal. But but the Cubs front office, the whole organization really fell behind in the last couple of years. And we're feeling it now. And it sucks.
Right. Or it's like they do the right thing but don't follow through on it. They make the trade for Castellanos, and he's incredible and loves the Cubs and wants to play for the Cubs. And then he signs with the Reds because the Cubs don't even make him an offer. And it's hard. Baseball is a sport where it's hard to act like one guy would make all the difference. Castellanos would make a huge difference on this team.
Make a huge difference. And he wanted to stay here. This is a little bit of news I got. I'm in Chicago right now. I saw a friend of mine, one of my good friends who will remain unnamed, but he works in the stadium, and he spoke with Nick Castellanos's wife, who he said was very nice, and she flat out told him, we just wanted to stay in Chicago. They never made an offer. And so I mean, that's fine if you do something else that works to cover that, and they just didn't. So I don't know, sorry to be a bummer, but I don't know what else we do in this moment, right?
I feel like we were about as reasonable as we could have been, if I'm being honest.
We talked about some people you can't blame or that you shouldn't blame, which is nice, So I mean, now congrats to the all-stars we have. It's very nice to see Chris Bryant deservingly get in and Craig Kimbrell get in, and there might be another all-star, who knows. I saw Buster Posey had a small nick up, so it's possible that Wilson Contreras could get in there again as a backup if Posey ends up sitting out. It's possible Chafin could get in as a replacement, but Yeah, I'm trying to think what other news or beats are there to talk about right now,
Nothing,
Adam?
nothing. Hopefully Steele is back soon. Um, Best wishes to PJ Higgins, who's out for the season. That sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got nothing. I mean, we're coming up on, but our next episode will be, during the All-Star break, I guess. And then after that, the Cubs have 6 games against the Diamondbacks the rest of this month. And if
Right.
you can't win 5 of those
5.
6, you don't deserve to. You don't deserve to buy at the deadline if you can't win 5 out of 6 against the Diamondbacks.
No, absolutely not. And you mentioning Steele coming back, I guess that's a bit of news to drop in, is that Justin Steele's been pitching multiple innings in the minors, and now there's some talk about stretching Steele and possibly Keegan Thompson out to see how they are as starters. And we've seen them as relievers and they've been so good. But they're both guys who've started their whole career. And I am interested, if the Cubs are not contending the rest of this year, I think why not stretch them out, get them, see where they're at as starting pitchers going forward. And you could see the beginnings of a future rotation here with a Justin Steele, with a Keegan Thompson, with a Corey Abbott, that sort of next wave of guys. So that could be something to look forward to watching develop the second half of this year.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I am going to go out on a limb and jinx us. And I'm
going
to say that the next time that we are recording a podcast, the Cubs will have won a game. I'm not going to say they're going to go 4-2. I'm not going to make any predictions. I'm just going to say they will win a game before the next time that we talk.
I think that's a great prediction.
And if they don't, that'll be the last episode of the podcast.
I think that's a great prediction because I think you're right. And if you're not, that's kind of hilarious too. So either way, follow us. We'll keep live tweeting and tweeting around these games at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And I guess we'll catch you at our All-Star break next week.